We talk about rut forecast, timing of the rut, and we talk about that every year. The rut happens at the same time every year. Unfortunately, there's still some moonisms out there and moon myths. And really, when you see big names endorsing that, it's really they're endorsing a product, usually not necessarily a method. This makes sense. And this is what biologists agree with all around the country. The rut begins at the same time. You can even look at John Azoga, Lou Verm, the guys up in northern Michigan, the UP of Michigan, that studied deer for a lifetime. And that was their life's work. And they ultrasounded a couple thousand does, found that the rut didn't vary at all from year to year over a 25 to 30 year period. And it didn't matter what the weather was, what the moon was, anything. It was at the same time every single year. And they found that. And there's been many other studies that have proven that too. However, rut activity can vary greatly based on the weather. Obviously, if it's a 90-degree day, just look at the extremes. 90-degree day, early November, pick a state, deer aren't going to be very active. 30, 40 degrees, 5 days later, deer are going to be very active. So when it's cooler temperatures, you find bucks cruising a lot more. When the temperatures, especially in the upper Midwest, for example, are under 50 degrees, 55, trail cam pictures will pick up. We had a warm night last night. We had a windy night last night. Hardly any trail cam photos. 2 nights ago, on October 20th, 19th, we had warm nights, just not much going on. But we have some cold nights coming up right now. In fact, it's going to be 30 tomorrow. It was 58 yesterday morning. It was in the high 40s this morning. It's going to be about 30 tomorrow morning. And I think Dylan told me in the 20s on Saturday morning, which is crazy. Dylan's pumped. He's back there, he's fist pumping. Yep, those frosty toe-numbing mornings, they're coming really, really quick here. But you will see daylight rut activity vary greatly based on the weather, but deer are still being, does are still being bred. And so they're still being bred at the same time. Just a lot of that activity will shift to nocturnal if the weather's warm. And seasoned deer hunters will see that. But if you believe that the rut doesn't happen at the same time every year, you're going to be really behind. Because even right now, some of the moon charts and moonisms are saying that the rut should be really peaking around opening day of gun season in Wisconsin. And folks, you're 3 weeks late to the party. And not to mention, pre-rut always takes place before rut, lockdown, peak rut. And so you're way behind, you're weeks behind if you're waiting for that period of time. I hope you're one of my neighbors. I really do, because no one's gonna be out in the woods if you're really waiting till that time frame to hunt. Wisconsin's opener is the Saturday before Thanksgiving. So we're talking fairly late, past the midpoint of November. And by then you're in post-rut phase and things are winding down. And if you're counting on rut activity, you're going to be sorely, sorely mistaken. And you've been basically misled, which is really unfortunate. So I want to talk about the rut roller coaster. And what I mean by that is, again, the rut takes place at the same time in your area every year. Where you'll see the biggest difference is if you have older bucks or not. If you have older bucks around, if you have a lot of bucks, they're going to leave a lot more rubs and scrapes. There's a lot more competition. You'll see a lot more activity. If you don't have bucks around, obviously, but if you don't have older bucks around especially, you're not going to see that activity. You're going to have to wait till peak rut to see that activity. A lot of people get into the peak rut and say, well, the rut's just begun. Well, it's because they didn't have any mature bucks to hunt. They weren't in the area, so they're not going to see that rutting sign, the rubs and scrapes, fresh rubs, fresh scrapes. And it's interesting, just popping into scrapes right now, there's a couple myths out there, and one Dylan brought up today, and another one too is that I was talking with a good friend of mine, Colin, this morning. We talked about just texting back and forth that at some point it looks like those scrapes aren't even being touched. What we find though in our trail cameras, we have over 30 trail cameras out in Minnesota and Wisconsin. You have them too, and so we get to see, and most of them are on scrapes. We like watching our mock scrapes. And what we'll find is the bucks will come in and they'll still leave scent on the vine, but they just won't make the scrape. I almost think it's like they're in too much of a hurry. So it's not that they're not traveling those same areas. Now, we're putting our mock scrapes in front of tree stands. We're putting our tree stands in front of cruising areas where we expect buck travel. So bucks don't have to go out of the way to hit our scrape. So that might be something too. If bucks have to go out to a field edge to hit a scrape that you've been seeing hit every day, they might not do so because they're just cruising. They're cruising in between bedding areas. That's why we have mock scrapes in front of stand locations. That's why we have trail cameras on mock scrapes in front of stand locations. Very effective tactic because we're doing that where we expect to kill bucks. Another myth when it comes to scraping activity is folks will actually say, and Dylan brought this one up, is that when it's raining out, after the rain, bucks have to go freshen their scrapes. They're not doing that, folks. They're doing this within their daily habits. They don't think, okay, it's raining, I got to go to XYZ scrape times 10 in the area and go freshen them up just because it rained. They're going to do that based on opportunity at that time of the year in between their normal travel routes. I hope that makes sense. But we see that popping up earlier during the pre-rut when you have older bucks, and you're gonna have to wait a week to 10 days when you get into those areas where you don't have a lot of older bucks and don't have a lot of buck competition. And when a buck ages, it leaves many times more rubs and scrapes. A 5-year-old buck will leave many times more scrapes, even a 3-year-old, than a 1.5-year-old or a yearling, 1.5-year-old buck. So the roller coaster I talk about, I'm hunting the weather the entire rut. I'm trying to slant my days off when I had to work for a boss and someone else. I slanted my days off to hunt by the weather. Long weekend. The worst thing you could do is take 9 days in a row and call that your rutcation. 3 days, 4 days are horrible weather. You shouldn't even be in a stand because you're just spooking things on the property, especially if you're limited to a small parcel. 3 or 4 days are top notch. And then 3 or 4 days you could just, hang out, maybe hunt a morning here, afternoon here, not your best stand. So I don't like taking 9 days because I'm losing 3 or 4 quality days that I could have taken another time. You're better off taking 3 weekends in a row. And if you can slant that towards a Monday or a Friday, depending on your long weekend, you're far better off taking that approach 3 weekends in a row, starting the pre-rut, peak rut, post-rut, and hitting all those phases than you are just putting all your eggs in one basket, burning out your land, your stand, your family, your boss, everything else. So I'm hunting that roller coaster of weather. Again, when the weather comes through, I'm hunting the back side of the front, like right now. Dylan and I actually went out and put water holes out today. It's October 20th or 21st? 21st. And it seems like an odd time to put water out. We did that, I think it was back in 2016, 17. We have a video clip of putting water out on the 18th, maybe around there, and a really nice buck hitting it on about the 20th, coming in, or even the next day. We were able to do that today, though, because a front's going through and we had up to 30-mile-an-hour winds. And so those winds provide a lot of cover noise. We have a lot of rain coming through, so it washes away our scent. So perfect time to get in the woods. And this is in Minnesota. I wish we could get over to Wisconsin and do that. But I was able to fill 4 out of 5 water holes. The other one wasn't that low. So we're all set for the rest of the year now. But I'm hunting that roller coaster weather. I'm looking for that opportunity, hunting the back side of the front. And that's why tonight's going to be a killer night to be in the stand. Tomorrow on Friday is going to be outstanding. Saturday morning is supposed to be in the 20s. This is when it's pre-rut time. Now we're in pre-rut right here because we're starting in southwest Wisconsin, southeast Minnesota, it'd be southern Michigan, over into northern Pennsylvania, southern New York, over into maybe even South Dakota, North Dakota. You're starting to see pre-rut activity around October 20th, 22nd. Now, if October 20th is 90 degrees, you're not going to see that activity on the 16th. There's a cutoff line there where it really begins. It really does begin the same time every single year. And then if you forward and there's a cold day on the 24th, it's really warm up to that time, your pre-rut activity will begin around the 24th. And so I'm making this chart right here that might not make a lot of sense just looking at it at first glance. I'm basing this on activity. There's a big difference between rut activity and daylight activity and cruising activity and huntable activity than actual biological activity. What I mean by that is by the time you get into the actual peak rut, which would be more like the post-rut phase in a lot of what I'm talking about activity, what I mean by that is people have hit the woods hard, people have overhunted, bucks are getting shy as a general rule overall, some bucks are dead, they're not moving around as much, does are freaked out because a lot of people are in the woods, they're spending their 9-day rutcation, and all of a sudden you get into peak rut breeding time and a lot of deer are being bred at night. But even if there's good weather, they're just really pushed down. By the time you get into November 10th, in southwest Wisconsin, southeast Minnesota, central Wisconsin, Minnesota, central Michigan. In that line, you could even include northern Indiana a little bit, would be more like November 15th, same with northern Illinois. You're starting to get into a lack of activity, even though those might be peak breeding dates. A lot of the breeding's taking place at night. I'm not saying there's not a flurry of activity. I loved hunting the post-rut. So there's a great opportunity to hunt in there. The pre-rut though, what I'm doing is I'm focusing on morning hunting. I'm not saying I'm not going out hunting in the evening. It's just say if I have to choose, like tomorrow we have a doctor's appointment in the afternoon, so I'm going hunting in the morning. And that's a focus, a priority in the pre-rut. If I could choose in that doctor's appointment, you know, we had great weather morning and evening like we are tomorrow, and the evening was a priority, then I would move that doctor's appointment to the morning so I could still hit that afternoon peak time. But morning, awesome pre-rut activity. And I'm going to talk about the morning priority here at the end. We'll just go down through these really quick. Rut lockdown. Why is there a lockdown? There's a lockdown because when it comes to hunting activity and rutting activity that you see, you have the pre-rut, lasts for 7-10 days, depending on when the weather starts, when there's good weather. Then you have that rut lockdown, and that's when a high percentage of does, an exponential amount of does are coming into heat. So you have the pre-rut, the build up, build a bit, all of a sudden a bunch of does are coming into heat. Every buck gets invited to the party. So for 3 or 4 days, they're all locked up with does. And I'm not saying that's not a good time to hunt, because I hunt all day during the rut lockdown, because you never know when that mature buck might be coming off his first doe of the season. It takes 2-3 days to breed, fight off other bucks, but all bucks are getting does, and looking for that next. He could be midday, he's cruising, morning cruising, afternoon cruising, but all day I'm looking for movement, and that only happens for 4 or 5 days, because all of a sudden these bucks start releasing, they find a does, and then it's becoming a lot more random. There's a lot more fighting goes on, and that's that peak rut. That's that peak rut activity lasts for 7 to 10 days. Around southwest Wisconsin, Minnesota, over into Michigan, Pennsylvania, New York, that rut lockdown might be early November for 4 or 5 days, end of October, right around there, but especially in through about the 3rd or the 4th. But we see after that it just explodes in activity on the trail cameras. That'd be November 5th, 6th. And it's funny because sometimes there's more activity October 24th, 27th, 28th in pre-rut than there is November 1st through the 4th in our area, because bucks are locked down. It almost seems like, well, you know, to the untrained eye, someone's looking at it and saying they're waiting for the rut. They didn't have any mature bucks. Then the rut lockdown hits, and they're looking at like, wow, the rut didn't start till November 6th. No, it's been going on for 2 weeks. You just didn't notice it, and you didn't have mature bucks in your area. Now you can flip that. You know, if I'm saying the rut lockdown in Wisconsin, Minnesota area, especially the southern portion, starts around the 1st of November, that means that's going to start 10th, 8th of November in southern Illinois, southern Indiana, southern Ohio, maybe into West Virginia, over to Oklahoma, portions of Tennessee. Kansas is even a little bit later, it seems. That might be more like the rut lockdown starting the 12th of November, something like that, with peak rut taking place 5 or 6 days later, like the 15th, 16th, 17th, where our peak rut up here is already ending at that time. That's why it's pretty cool if you know, depending on where you hunt. I could hunt up here in the Midwest, and then I've followed bad weather, good hunting weather, down to southern Ohio and had great success the Monday before Thanksgiving, because there was still post-rut activity down there where there wasn't up here. In Kansas might be even a little later than that. So if you really wanted to time your hunts, you're better off going from 3 or 4 states away and going a lot further south than you are going right next door, and because you're going to be hitting those same timings like we do in Minnesota and Wisconsin here. So that's kind of what's happening. You have that peak rut, now you have that post-rut. And that post-rut activity around here, again, you can fast forward 10 days, 7 days later in some of those southern states I mentioned, but you're looking at the post-rut starting about the 10th, 11th, 12th as far as rutting activity. Meaning if you're counting for the rut to go out to a great stand, the activity levels are really waning. They're really boiling down. I'm not saying it's not a great time to hunt. I still love hunting the post-rut because there's always that opportunity. But then keep in mind, if there's bad weather, warm weather, big winds, bucks are not going to be moving much during that post-rut. They've already had 2 or 3 does they bred. They want to go, this is a time when they'll go really long distance and really looking for a next doe. But then at the same time, they've lost a lot of body weight during that first primary rut. So they're looking for their last doe, but if all the conditions are perfect, think about that. They want to replenish food. And that's why when you skip down to here, I focus on evening hunting in the post-rut, because deer want to replenish their food sources. Peak, I'm looking at all day. And then the 2nd and 3rd rut, there is a 2nd and a 3rd rut. I really focus on evenings because deer are hungry. they're moving around, they want to replenish food sources. And that's why it can be such a dull period of time in between, say, November 15th, November 12th, 14th, somewhere around there in our area. You can fast forward, depending if you're in West Virginia, you could add another 10 days, 12 days. Kentucky, same thing. Tennessee, Oklahoma, Virginia, you could add another 10, 12 days. But there's a period of time in there where about 10 days, 12 days, it just seems like the woods are dead. That's because it's in between the post-rut, the second rut starting again. Deer need to rest, bucks especially. They've been working really hard. They've lost a high percentage of body fat, body weight overall. So it's a really dull time right there. And that's a great time for gun season because so many bucks are killed during gun season anyways. The first few hours of the day. It's a good time for a little bit of break, and that's why I focus on a lot of evening hunting after the first opening day or two in the gun seasons I go to, because bucks are not moving much in the morning. Hunters have been out in the woods, the big orange army, but they're really an unpressured evening food sources that time of year can be golden. Just incredible opportunities to hunt during that time of the year because, again, bucks are trying to replenish. So if it's a warm evening, probably not great hunting. If it's a cold evening and they get that hunger on them a little bit, they're getting chilled, they'll go hit those food sources either earlier to keep warm. And that's where you fast forward 25 to 30 days later from that rut lockdown, early peak rut days, and that's when that second rut is. Second rut is a little bit narrower window. Those does that weren't bred the first time because so many does were coming into heat. And that's really literally what's happening. Or those yearling buck or those fawn does are coming into heat because they queued off the estrus period of their mothers, and 25, 30 days later they're coming into heat, and that's where the second rut comes. And there's actually a third rut. Again, the second rut, not as intense as the peak rut, but it's the most missed time in the deer wood. So it's a great time to get out and hunt. It's the most missed time. We've shot some nice bucks during that time, a lot of rutting activity. And then another 25, 30 days, you're going to hit that third rut. So if there's still does being bred, look for some good. We had a tank come through, a 5-year-old last year, making rubs and scrapes all the way through. Great opportunity in early January for rutting activity, just tearing up the woods, open rubs, open scrapes, fresh rubs on top of the snow. Very cool time. A lot of people miss that, of course, too. A lot of people are just thinking about other things at that time, and their hunting season is a lot shorter than that. So I'm looking at morning, focusing on morning hunts in the pre-rut all day during the lockdown and peak, evening the post and second and third ruts. But number 7 down here, morning priority. What do I mean by that? I rarely miss mornings during the rut. It's a calm time, especially back in the woods, especially back by bedding areas. I find there's always some movement in the morning. If there's some rutting activity going on and you have some does passing by your stand in a remote location near bedding in the morning, what a hot spot. That can take place on public land, private land, really doesn't matter where it's at. And then a lot of times what happens is even though those bucks want to replenish all those fat and energy reserves that they've burned off, a lot of food sources are overhunted and overpressured, ag fields, whatever it might be. So they're not getting to those evening food sources until well after dark. If you have hidden, unpressured food sources, evening rut hunting is outstanding. But they'll move several times longer in the morning hours. The morning hours are cooler. So when the weather's bad, let's say it's getting up to 60, the end of November, let's say it's getting up to 90 down in Florida, the end of November, or Louisiana, then those mornings where you have cold temperatures, 60s in Florida, 65 compared to the 90-day high, maybe 40 in the morning compared to 62 in Wisconsin later in the afternoon. Those mornings can be prime because it's just too hot in the afternoon for those big body bucks to move until right after dark or a little ways after dark. So that's how I hunt. I focus on bedding area mornings. I focus on evening food sources. I hunt that roller coaster of the weather. I try to score the day, meaning I'm not sitting, when I say all day, I'm not sitting in one stand all day, because my evening stand better match up with food source movements and my morning stand better match up with bedding area movements. And there's very few actual stands out there that relate to all those at the same time. Maybe on public land, you're in between 2 clear cuts. They're a 1/4 mile apart. You're on a ridge with a nice funnel, maybe a bench system. There's bedding area nearby, and you're hunting that perfect funnel of movement where deer could be going to one clear cut to feed or the other one, bucks are cruising between the two. They're also between bedding areas. Those clear cuts represent the food sources on public land. That's that perfect X of movement. You can find those perfect X of movements on private land too. You might have a distant food source, ag field. You might have a food plot. You're in between bedding at the same time. You're almost in that X where you have food source, bedding, and you're in that X. Might be appropriate for an all-day stand, but very few stands, I'd say 10 to 15% at most during the rut, are actually all-day stands. Unfortunately, far too many people spend a lot of time in one location all stinking day. That means if it's a great morning stand, it's a bad evening stand most of the time. If it's a great evening stand and they go into it in the morning, they probably bust a deer out, because great evening stands have to deal with food sources. You go into a food source blind in the morning, you're really asking for trouble when it comes to busting deer. This is a very abbreviated How to Hunt the Rut. I actually have a Rut Whitetail web class, How to Hunt the Rut. It's been out. I appreciate the dozens of you that have purchased it. I'm getting good reviews on that and feedback. I really appreciate you guys trying that out. It's on my website, whitetailabbatiatsolutions.com. Also, RutCast comes with the Huntwise app and the Elite membership. HuntCast does too, and so RutCast is something I help create through the Huntwise app. HuntCast, I help create that, and that's why I talk about it so much, because those two are my babies. I've navigated and hunted the rut my whole life, identified it. I want you to be able to track the rut, but not only track the timing of the rut for your area, but to actually be able to hunt it effectively. So if you want a little bit more abbreviated version, there's RutCast with Huntwise and the Huntwise app. And then of course I have my How to Hunt the Whitetail Rut web class. And I appreciate you guys checking that out, along with my other web classes that I offer too. Most of all, I just want you to be successful during the rut. You can check out the links for both Huntwise and my rut web class within the description of this video. I appreciate you watching till the end. Most of all, I can't wait to hear about your stories, because let's face it, whitetail dreams are made and created during the rut. That's where the big buck encounters are all. And I'm not saying it's not fun shooting a doe here and there, but very few people sit around the fire at night talking about the legendary doe that got away over and over and grew and lived for years. They're talking about those bucks out there. This is a time to shoot them. This is a time to track them, hunt them. And I hope you can hunt them a little bit more effectively after watching this video this year and beyond. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be How to Hunt the Rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to 93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes so that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.